Filipino directors have been creating great works ever since the beginnings of Philippine movie making. Of these pioneer directors, one master rose to great prominence. Ask the film historians, the film buffs and experts, the actors, and the craftsmen who worked with him. Even his contemporaries and peers, the new breed of filmmakers, they all agree when they say,
ang feeling mo, pag ni-generate ka ni Jerry, talagang you're good, you're somebody.
If you're watching a Jerry De Leon film, his films speak so much that you begin to wonder who's the man behind these works. And that for me is very intriguing. You know, he has films that were really way ahead of his time.
Maraming magagaling na director ngayon, yes. Pero para sa akin, walang makakapantay kay Manong Jerry. As a director, as a human being, as a friend, and iba siya.
Isa siya sa mga naging pioneers sa paggawa ng pelikula na masasabi nating may kasiningan.
It's an honor really working with Jerry De Leon because he's such a good director. Napakagaling niya.
So the value really, apart from actually seeing his films, hearing stories about him, and even meeting people who got to work with him, is really the realization of wanting to know more about Filipino cinema history as a whole, no?
In my course on Philippine cinema, I divide the history of cinema into generations of filmmakers. So the first generation would be composed of Jose Nepomuceno and Vicente Salambuides, and other filmmakers. And the second generation would include Jerry De Leon, Lamberto Avellana, Manuel Conde, and others. And then the third generation would be composed of Lino Broca and his generation of filmmakers.
Gerardo De Leon is considered one of the most important Filipino filmmakers of all time, and not just Filipino, but he has been considered as a figure of world cinema. And this was cited no less by a very famous French critic, Georges Sadoul, who included Jerry De Leon during the 70s as among the only Filipino filmmaker listed in the World Dictionary of Filmmakers.
We regard Jerry De Leon as arguably the most significant or the most important Filipino filmmaker, but at the same time, nailalagay lang sa isang mitolohiya, mito, because we don't see the works. That's the problem. Yun yung tragedy ng Jerry De Leon.
Salamat sa Alaala, salamat sa'yo, Sinta. Tamis ng iyong mga labi, alaala ko siya tuwina. Hindi ko malilimutan lambing ng ating sumpaan. Kahit daging na parang salamat sa'yo.
How did this come about? Why is there so much acclaim, awe, and respect for Gerardo De Leon then and now? Let us begin to understand the artist and the man behind the acclaim. Together, let us encounter the master filmmaker behind the camera.
On September 12, 1913, Gerardo De Leon was born to a family of artists. His father, Hermogenes Ilagan, was a famous writer, stage director, and head of a zarzuela group. His mother, Casiana De Leon, was a singer. He was baptized Gerardo De Leon Ilagan. His brothers and sisters were all involved in both stage and screen, either as actors, singers, or filmmakers. As Sister Leonor recalls her siblings.
Akala ng mga tao, araw-araw may party sa bahay. Dahil may kantahan, may tugtugan, may sayawan. Kami-kami lang yun.
His love for the movies may have started when, as a teenager, provided piano music as accompaniment to films being shown in Manila movie theaters during the era of silent films. But initially, Jerry seemed to be determined to take a different course from the other members of his family. He studied medicine in college at the University of Santo Tomas. Even while studying in UST, he was already playing bit parts in films like Mga Pusong Dakila and Bukang Liwayway. When he finished, he garnered 5th place in the medical board examinations. For a while, he practiced medicine, but his practice did not last long because he found himself too compassionate to be one, as he did not accept payment from his relatives and poor and destitute patients. Perhaps that was only an excuse because the lure of the movies was stronger. And so he decided to abandon medicine for his real love, the movies. Later on, he became an actor, making his acting debut in the 1934 film Ang Dangal. He made 8 more films as an actor before he decided to be behind the camera. Thus, he became a director. At the time, there were so many Ilagans involved in the theater and the movies, which included Conrado Conde, Angel Esmeralda, Eddie Ilagan, musical scorer Tito Arevalo, and later on, his nephew Robert Arevalo, and his daughter Liberty Ilagan.
I suppose because as an offshoot of Dalagang Bukid, they probably had enough intuition to know that the zarzuela was on its way out and movies were coming in. They switched their interests, and all of them worked with my father. The one who became the biggest one was Angel Esmeralda.
With so many Ilagans, he opted to drop his baptismal name Gerardo Ilagan and chose to use Gerardo de Leon instead, de Leon being his maternal family name. Nicknamed Manong Jerry, he made his directorial debut in 1939 with the movie Bahay Kubo, a musical which reportedly got good reviews. Later on, he directed himself and played father to his brother Tito Arevalo in the movie Ama't Anak. His biggest hit as director during pre-war was Ang Maestra, which starred Rogelio de la Rosa and Rosa del Rosario, with the still unknown Eddie Romero as writer.
I remember every time my dad would be interviewed, how he started in the business, he always mentioned Manong Jerry. Kasi he was a boy of 16 yata, and he was an active writer in school, in Silman, in Dumaguete, and he sent short stories to Free Press. And one of his stories got published. Napansin ata ni Manong yon. So, sulatan pa nung araw yata, no? So kinontact siya and then asked him to come to Manila to write the script. So siguro hindi alam ni Manong kung anong edad nitong kinokontak niyang Eddie Romero. And dumating dito, bata. And Daddy didn't even know how to speak Tagalog. So, but he was asked to write a script in English, pinatranslate na lang.
For 3.5 decades, from 1940 to 1975, Manong directed more than 75 movies in almost every genre. Name it, he directed it. Musicals, action fantasy films, serious dramas, adaptations of popular comic books, as well as Jose Rizal's novels. And most intriguing, a handful of anti-American propaganda films produced in collaboration with the occupying Japanese forces during World War II. He had a productive life as a film director, spending most of his life in shooting films. Yet, he made sure to spend time with his family. The woman he married was the female lead actress of the very first film he directed, Feli Vallejo. They had 3 beautiful daughters, over whom he was very protective. Liberty, one of 3 daughters, remembers her dad as a doting father.
Jerry De Leon, as a father, is a very sweet father. He's very nice, he's very kind, hindi siya sumisigaw. Pag nagalit yun, ibang klase, one-liner lang. But I'd rather not say what that line is. Yun. Tapos, ano siya, yung bang, ano siya, hindi niya ini-stunt ang growth namin when it comes to our mind. We can read all the books na we want to read. Wala siyang censorship sa mga books na we read. All his books we can read. Pero ano naman siya? Pero he wants us to be very close to the Lord. Ayun, nag-aano kami, talagang nagsisimba kami every Sunday. He brings us to church. And then after that, we eat out. Most of the time, talaga, we go to the movies, we eat out. He takes time to be with his family.
The same sentiments are echoed by Baby, the youngest daughter.
Namimili siyang friends. Aanahin niya lahat ng friends o mga nanliligo sa amin. Dadali niya lahat yun sa papakainin niya, sasama niya. Para kikilatisin niya, gano'n. Pero lax siya in a way, kaya sinasabing disciplinarian, ano? Lax siya in a way na, bawa, napuyat ka, ayaw mong pumasok bukas. Si Maria Fe, sabi na Auntie Laling, pumasok ba? Hindi. Sabi ko, ba't di ka pumasok? Puyat ako eh. Puyat ako, may sakit ulo ko. Okay lang. Tapos sisini kami, gabi na, magagalit si Auntie Laling. Sabi niya, Jerry, sabi niya si Maria Fe, hindi na naman yan papasok bukas, mapupuya. Di wag pumasok.
Yung pag may nanliligaw sa amin, let's say may bisita ako. Hindi niya type yung aking bisita. Magdidilig ng halaman yun. Kung saan, yung bahay namin maraming bintana. Kung saan nakaupo ako, at yung bisita ko, sa tapat no, nandun siya. Malulunod na yung halaman. Ganon.
Ronaldo Valdez, a son-in-law, experienced this overprotectiveness of Manong Jerry during his courtship of Baby.
Nanliligaw ako kay Baby. So, pinasukan ko siyang bigla ng sabi ko, can I take your daughter out? Sabi ko, nonod lang kami ng sine. So, okay. Siya relaxed eh. Sure, sige. Sama niyo siya. Meron palang chaperon.
Ganon. Tapos pag may date, hindi pwedeng walang chaperon. Kailangan may chaperon. Kung hindi katulong, si Vicky, si ate. Sama mo si ate. Gano'n siya.
That's my dad. And he's proud of us, especially because it's important to him for his daughter to have proper decorum.
Sa naaalala ko, parang marami kaming quality time together. Finifilm, I remember finifilm niya ako or nire-record yung pagkanta ko. May isang malaking regret sa akin na hindi niya ako naging artista. Yun, isa sa mga pinaghihinayangan ko yun. Sana itong part of my life na nag-aartista na ako, sana kahit isang beses, 'di ba, naging director ko siya.
War broke out when he was making Panambitan, but the film was released when the Japanese had already occupied Manila. During the Japanese occupation, he co-directed Liwayway ng Kalayaan or Dawn of Freedom with Abe Yutaka. He also directed Ang Tatlong Maria. Liwayway ng Kalayaan, a Toho superproduction, was a piece of propaganda meant to portray the Americans as villains and the Japanese as allies.
malakas na bombang inihulog nila kanina ay parang isang panaginip. Isang himala at buhay pa tayo ngayon.
In 1948, recovered from the car accident that damaged his voice box, Manong moved to Premier Productions and unleashed his creative genius. His major films started with 48 Oras, about a man who has only 48 hours of life left to hunt down his wife's murderers. In 1951, he directed Sisa, which dramatizes the story of one of the most popular supporting characters in Rizal's novel, Noli Me Tangere. This was his first attempt to put a story by Philippine national hero Jose Rizal on the big screen, and will not be the last.
Ang Sisa ay napaka-interesting kasi kinuha niyang isang fictional character ni Rizal tapos ginawa niya ng bagong interpretasyon, no? So hindi lang siya yung Sisa ni Rizal Actually, ginawa niyang allegorical figure. Si Sisa ay inang bayan.
In 1952, he directed Sawa sa Lumang Simboryo, which is considered a classic of Filipino fantasy filmmaking. It is an adaptation of a comic story about a simple farmer driven by the Spaniards to become an outlaw. This was followed by Jezebel, also adapted from a comic story written by Mars Ravelo. It weaves a haunting love story between man and fish. The film was a great hit and inspired countless sequels and remakes, not counting TV series. Sandawong is another fantasy film, and it tells the story of two men, one a rich man, the other a bandit named Sandawong, who become friends and how their friendship is sorely tested. It is interesting to note that this was a co-production of Hong Kong and the Philippines, a testimony to the fact that during that time, the level of filmmaking in the Philippines was actually superior to that of Hong Kong. During the period, Manong directed Saigon, a film shot on location in Vietnam when the country was racked by war. In Saigon, he even managed to once again summon his medical skills to assist the famous Dr. Tom Dooley in one medical operation. In 1954, using expired color film, he directed Ifugao. He won the Best Director Award in the 1955 Asian Film Festival held in Singapore. Among the judges was the Oscar-winning director David Lean. Lean was so impressed with the direction of Manong Jerry, he invited him to work with him in England. In the 1960s, Manong Jerry directed The Moises Padilla Story, based on a true story of a man running for mayor in Bugallon, Negros Occidental, who is crushed by the province's corrupt governor. While it was a commissioned work for political purposes, De Leon took his assignment seriously and produced an outstanding piece of work that transcends propaganda, depicting a dramatic parallelism between Padilla's ordeal and Christ's agony and crucifixion by focusing on its Judas, with Joseph Estrada as Padilla's chief torturer and former best friend.
Even in the early days of my movie career, I always had a deep admiration for Jerry De Leon, or Manong, as we affectionately called him. I always consider him as the dean of Filipino directors. In fact, I would not have considered my movie career complete if I would have lost the chance of working under him. My opportunity came in the Moises Padilla story. Even if I was already in lead roles, I accepted this supporting role because of my respect and admiration for this man.
In 1961, he directed Daigdig na Mga Api, considered as his masterpiece, but now lost to the ages because no extant copy can be found. Initially meant to be a promotional film about land reform during the term of President Diosdado Macapagal, Manong was still filming when Macapagal lost that election year. Manong's artistry transcended the political purpose to produce a classic film about humanity. The film garnered 8 famous awards. In both 1961 and 1962, De Leon finally tackled the full-scale adaptations of Jose Rizal's 2 major novels, Noli Me Tangere and its sequel, El Filibusterismo.
Yung paggawa niya ng Noli ay isang bagay na dapat hangaan kasi ito yung panahon na kinu-question ng simbahan ang gamit sa Noli Me Tangere at Filibusterismo bilang reading material sa eskwelahan. Kasi nagkaroon na ng Rizal Law at ito ay nilalabanan ng maraming sektor na ang pakiramdam ay parang pag binasa mo ang Noli at saka ang Fili, parang ito ay laban sa simbahan.
Noli Me Tangere, with Eddie Del Mar as Ibarra, underplayed his emotional role. But the strongest performance comes from Leopoldo Salcedo as Elias.
Paano niya hinangad ang aking kamatayan?
Maria.
Kamatayan hindi nangyari kailanman kahit pinagpilitang gawin ng aking ama sa tulong ng sari-saring gamot.
Tama ng iyong ninuno. Si Don Pedro Ibarra Mendia. Napakahaba ang aming apelyido. Kaya hindi kaya. Para Mendia ang ulupong na nagbintang sa aking ulo. Ibarra Mendia ang naging sanhi ng lahat ng aming kasawian. Kay tagal kong hinanap ang pangalang yan. At ngayon, kayo'y pinagkaloob sa akin ng Diyos. Pananagutan niyo sa akin ang lahat ng aming pagkapi. Pagmasdan mo kung hindi ako naghirap. At kayo ay nabubuhay, umiibig. Meron kayong mga kayamanan, pamamahay, mga katangian. Nabubuhay kayo. Kayo'y buhay.
El Filibusterismo shows Manong Jerry at the peak of his powers, an occasion for Manong to display fully his Gothic sensibilities. Most of all, he had Pancho Magalona, giving the performance of his life as Simon, driven to destroy everything and everyone with his thirst for vengeance. Later in his career, Manong Jerry made movies for Roger Corman, the king of B movies in the U.S. Eddie Romero, a screenwriter and director, his friend and one-time protege, was perceptive enough to start an independent production distribution company in the Philippines called Hemisphere Pictures, with American producers at the end of the studio-dominated era. Among Manong Jerry's early films for Hemisphere Pictures was Intramuros, later retitled The Walls of Hell, a well-regarded war movie that marked the first of the many projects Manong Jerry co-directed with Eddie Romero.
There are 20,000 Filipinos in there. And when your artillery goes to work, take my word for it. They don't care who or what they blow up as long as it's in Intramuros. Any of you ever think of that? Or have you become Americans too? get Tina out?
Yes, she's fine.
Then it was worth it. Wasn't it?
Yes, Papa.
But after a while, Manong Jerry went back to direct for the local market. Two of his most notable vampire films, Kulay Dugo ang Gabi and Ibulong Mo sa Hangin, were both praised for mystifying yet equally terrifying visuals. He also made two films with Nora Aunor. The first was a segment of the omnibus film Fe, Esperanza, Caridad, which he co-directed with Sirio Santiago and Lamberto Avellana and produced by Nora's Envy Productions in 1974.
Kanina kasi sabi ko si Manong Jerry De Leon ang maituturing kong pinakamagaling na direktor natin dito sa Pilipinas. At kapag sinabi mong Jerry De Leon, talagang walang magtatanong, talagang Jerry De Leon talaga. At napakaswerte ko na naging direktor ko siya sa Fe, Esperanza, Caridad, yung Caridad episode at saka Banawe.
In 1975, he again directed Nora Aunor in Banawe, this time with Christopher De Leon, who got critical attention for his outstanding performance in Lino Broca's Tinimbang Ka, Ngunit Kulang.
Everything was epic. Everything was done with vision, artistry, and the script was crisp, and you know, it was meaningful. It was a macho movie. It was a gritty movie. It was a movie about warriors and, you know, integrity and bravery and courage, and you know, si Manong has that, and we lack that now in our movies. You know, yung bravery, honor, and you know, fighting for what is right, and you know, being greedy and all that. You know, he combines all of that. He combines all of that in his script, and it becomes very, very interesting. It becomes a universal, and it becomes everybody's feeling, everybody's, well.
Juan de la Cruz was his last project. The project began in 1976. Manong was said to be effusive about his enthusiasm for the film.
Juan de la Cruz, to be honest with you, hanggang ngayon hindi ko maisip paano ako napili ni Mr. Jerry De Leon para gumanap sa kanyang masterpiece na Juan de la Cruz. First shooting day, doon ko nakilala ang aming direktor, si Manong Jerry kung tawagin. Napansin ko meron siyang dalang oxygen tank because he had emphysema yata, no? So I really had to go very close to him kasi parang nag-whisper lang. And his first line was, Gloria Romero, hindi na ikaw si Gloria Romero mo mula sa araw na to. Iibahin kita. Hindi mo na siya makikilala. Oh my God, lalo ako ninervyos. Maganda naman yung first shooting day namin. I had extreme close-ups na iba-iba. Una, hanggang dito lang. Hanggang dito, hanggang extreme close-ups. So he said, again, let's see, Gloria, what you can do. Ay, oh my God. Lalo, maiyak-iyak na ako talaga sa nervyos. I can't remember really 2 or 3 shooting days. And then, nagkasakit si Manong Jerry. At ang sabi, hold mo na lahat ng mga shootings. Because unang-una, he was not happy with the costumes. Kasi may dala siyang folder na pati kwelyo, pati botones. And there was a scene na nagpa-plancha ako doon. Lahat ng klaseng plancha nilabas, nagpakita na naman ng picture. Yung parang medyo bilog na ganyan, na may handle. Na yun ang ginaganon-ganon sa plancha. Hindi siya tumigil hanggat hindi nahanap yon. So sabi niya, I am not going to shoot this. Sabi niya ganon. Pack up for today. Ay, ang dami-dami na naming extra doon. Ang dami-dami ng kabayo, karwahe. Ang dami naming extra na naka-costume na ng, fabulous talaga yung mga costume. He said, I am not going to shoot this hanggat hindi tama lahat ng aking props.
Weakened by sickness, Manong Jerry died on July 21, 1981.
I did not have the opportunity to see Manong Jerry at work. But as a director myself, I am curious as to how he directed films, how he managed the set, how he dealt with people. How was it to work with him? What were his peculiar working style and habits? Was he difficult to work with? Was he a difficult person? How did he treat his actors and crew? Ano bang diskarte ni Manong Jerry sa set?
Napaka-cool and collected. Hindi ka maano sa kanya, hindi ka ma-i-intimidate. So that, ang nangyayari, relaxed ang working condition.
Pagka si Jerry De Leon ang director, sa set, iba ang atmosphere. Parang you feel that you are doing something really very important and that you are in good hands.
Yeah,
Na
that's
alam mo na this scene is going to turn out well because the director is Jerry De Leon.
Talagang believe ako kay Manong Jerry. Ultimo, pag-move sa eyes mo, tinuturoan ka. Very soft-spoken pa yung director na, ang tawag niya sa akin, Gloria, yung mata mo, wag, yan, tagilid ng konti. Paglabas, ang ganda ko, hindi naman ako maganda, pero napapaganda ka ni Manong Jerry, napapaarte ka niya ng gusto. Para bang, you will feel at home with him.
He is the master, parang ganon, parang I'm going to do everything right dahil hindi niya papayagan na magkamali ka. And that honed me as an actress, I suppose. Because before that, puro mga light lang ang ginagawa ko. Only when I did Daigdig ng Mga Api was very serious.
Doon sa Daigdig ng Mga Api, marami kaming kasamang mga newcomers. As a matter of fact, yung lead role, talagang ang lead talaga doon si Jet Del Mundo, kapatid ni Doy Del Mundo. At ang kanyang leading lady, si Mona Del Cielo ba ang pangalan niya? Si Mona Del Cielo na baguhan din. No? At si Lenny Alano, ang supporting kasama rin, baguhan din.
Lenny Alano, the supporting actress in Daigdig na Mga Api, never acted in films prior to that film. Yet, Manong Jerry was able to coax great acting from her. Impressive enough to get the nod of jurors to give her the Best Supporting Actress Award for that film.
That was the first and the only movie I made, and I was very fortunate to have as my director Mr. Jerry De Leon. We filmed in Candaba, Pampanga for 3 months. I always wondered how a director could impart his what he wanted done in a particular scene. How could he impart this with such a soft voice? But when he wanted a scene done, he would speak in this raspy, soft voice, and everybody would have to be quiet. The whole set would just be, you could hear a pin drop, because we had to really listen to what he had to say. And because of this, because we had to make effort to listen to everything, to all his instructions, it was almost always take one. When they gave me a call sheet for the evening, there was going to be a shooting. They were going to shoot a scene in the rice granary. There was this big rice granary in Candaba, and there were only 2 people who got a call slip for that scene, and it was only Oscar Kessie and myself. And I said, so what's this going to be all about? Because there were only 2 of us. The rest didn't come. After dinner, they didn't come for shooting. And they said, well, we're going to shoot a rape scene. And I said, who's going to be raped? I said, you, me. No, I'm not going to do any rape scene. So when I refused, and I said, why do we have to have a rape scene? This is not part of land reform and all that stuff. And he said, one of the crew, I think it was Mike Action who said, but what is a Jerry De Leon film without a rape scene?
Anyway, I saw how he handled, how he guided newcomers. Jet Del Mundo had not done any film before that. No? Na gusto naman ng Jerry yun. Kasi mga ibang mga director sa Amerika rin, sa Hollywood or sa mga Russian directors yata ang ganon. Mas gusto nila yung talagang hindi lang hilaw, hindi actor talaga ang gagawin nilang actor. Ito talagang namod niya napagalaw niya, napaarte niya. He got very genuine, raw emotions from the actor.
Don't cast a very important person like if you're going to cast Jesus Christ. Don't cast Clark Gable because then you'll be fighting against the imagination of the mass. And they'll say that's Clark Gable, that's Jesus Christ.
Well, Jerry, for me, is an actor's director. He could really mold an actor according to his taste, especially for newcomers. He was very good at that.
This is a trade secret, no? But since this came from Manong, Jerry, every time I have a scene with the leading lady, he would always instruct me not just to look straight in the eye and deliver my lines. No, he instructed me to look both in the eyes, the lips, like the cheek, and while saying your lines, you're admiring, and you have beautiful eyes, your beautiful nose, your beautiful cheek. I was not just looking straight and saying my lines, looking straight in the eyes of my leading lady. Siguro, yung internalization is, I admire her, but it's more active when you're like, wow, pretty her face, her eyes, while saying the lines. It's that is what I learned from Manong, and then I carried that all the way up to now. I'm carrying that the trade secret that he has given me, and I treasure that very much.
One of those who should know Manong Jerry's style is Amalia Fuentes, who was his actress and producer for Kulay Dugo ang Gabi and Ibulong Mo sa Hangin.
I have such a high regard for Manong. My respect for him was such that anything he would ask me to do, ang sarap nung makakuha ka nung ganong director na you put yourself in his hands, and I allowed him to mold me as he saw fit. Ganon ang feeling ko sa kanya na I was like Patty in his hands.
I was in awe. I had already seen some of his major films. And to be working with him was enough to just being able to sit there and feel my way into the ano. So hindi ko kailangan yung marami siyang sasabihin. Before that, I worked in theater. So you had a lot of time to get into the character. You had a lot of discussions. There's no such thing with him. He was just the director. And I think through him, at least him among very few directors, that I learned how it was to be a director. Yung the night that we were filming that scene niya, alam ko na na may kutob na ako as the character, the friend of Caridad. Pareho kaming madre. May kutob na ako na tatakas ito, na makikipagtanan doon sa demonyong taong yun. And when she opens the door to go out, I'm there in front of the door at nakaluhod ako, di ba?
Dinadalangin ko sanang bigyan ka ng Diyos ng liwanag ng pag-iisip. Ngunit, hindi niya yata ako narinig.
Alam mo, Marta,
matagal ko nang minaman-manan ang mga kilos mo. At kanina, narinig kong sinabi niyang,
mamayang ating gabi. Paranin mo ako, Marta. Kanina pa siya naghihintay. Sa ngalan ng Diyos, Caridad, hindi mo maaaring gawin ito. Pabayaan mo na ako, Marta. Hindi kita papayagan. Hindi ka makalalabas sa pitong ito. Ngunit, Marta, kanina pa niya ako inihintay. Hindi maaari. Patayin mo man ako, hindi kita papayagan. Pabayaan mo na ako, Marta. Utang na loob.
hindi ka ba kinikilabutan sa binabalak mong gawin? Matagal na tayo naging madre, Caridad. Wala na tayong layang magbalik sa pinagmulan. Sabay tayong sumumpa. Nalimutan mo na ba?
Isang tuhog yun hanggang exit. Perfect. So, kala ko, parang, siyempre, you know, parang you do your best. No? Tapos, so, isa pa. So, iniisip ko, okay, kanino, bakit kaya, di ba? So, parang iniisip ko, bakit kaya? Ginawa na naman namin, parang, okay, ano ba, wala namang adjustment. Pero, sa akin nakatingin. So, alam ko ako ang may pagkukulang. Ulit. Ginawa na naman namin. Ganun. Tapos, perfect. Sa akin pa rin nakatingin. Iniisip ko, what am I doing wrong? But I was too shy to ask him nga. Wala siyang sinasabi. So, take 5. So, I think, what is it? What is it? Hanggang sa finally, you know, finally, I really put myself that I was that character. I was the best friend. And I was, you know, I took my vows seriously. And I was really afraid for her soul, that I cared enough about her. So, lahat itong ganon. And finally, I just stayed with the feeling. Because anyway, hindi ko na kailangan isipin ng lines at blocking ko. Memoryado ko na eh. Kahit ano eh. Kahit tulog siguro ako. Pero I just stayed with that feeling. And then finally, ginod niya. And you know, I had that feeling. Yung parang I had that aftertaste na baka ginod lang niya ito kasi yan ang talagang pinaka-best na magagawa ko. And I was thinking, siguro baka na-disappoint sa akin to or ano. But then I learned na it's not just executing the directions perfectly. It's feeling the character. Because his characters, like when you look at his films, ang ganda ng blocking, ang ganda ng camera work, ang ganda, ano. But, over and above that, yung artista, ang ganda ng passion na lumalabas sa ano. Oo. So, at that moment, I became a Jerry De Leon actress. I felt I finally graduated into acting on film. And it was such a privilege na sa kanya ko natutunan yun.
Mila Del Sol, whom Manong directed in Prinsesa ng Kumintang in 1940, recalls being smitten by him.
Yes, I work with Jerry. I love him. He's so nice. Yung bang very soft-spoken ba? Hindi mo kumisan alam kung nagagalit na o hindi kasi very, very soft siya. Basta, Sasabihin lang niya kung ano dapat mong gawin, and then do your thing. Hindi siya masyadong nakikialam. Pero maganda ang kanyang mga, very picturesque ang kanyang frame eh. That's what I discovered about him. Para bang every frame tells a story.
Kumintang, hindi ko masyadong natatandaan ang ginawa namin, but natatandaan ko si Jerry talaga. He's very handsome. I love him. Hindi niya alam yan kung sabihin. May crush ako sa kanya eh. Siguro alam niya, kaya binitawan ako agad. Takot siya siguro. Sabi niya, sira ulo nito.
Bebong Osorio, a child actor who played Crispin in Sisa, recalls the words imparted by Manong Jerry.
Si Manong Jerry, very soft spoken yun, pero ang boses niya, anong boses na malumanay magsalita. Nag-shooting kami sa hinahanap, nag-take na. Pagka-take, nasa si Bebong, sabi Manong. Tapos pag ganun ko, dumati ako, nasaan ka? Kung gagamba. Bakit ka nagagamba? Sabi niya, alam mo ba na nagtatrabaho ka? Hindi ka naglalaro dito. Sabi niya, bata ka pa. Akala mo ito laro. Pero hindi laro ito. Ang trabaho. Alam mo, sabi niya, maliit ka pa. Pag lumaki ka, magtatrabaho ka. Ang lagi mong isipin, mahalin mo ang trabaho mo, at ilagay mo sa isip mo na kung ano man ang papasukin mong trabaho, maging top ka, or hindi man, one of the top ka, ng kung ano mang trabaho maisip mo.
I remember Manong's voice. Every time he would give me direction, wherein I played the young Juan de la Cruz na nung lumaki, it was FPJ who was going to play Juan de la Cruz. My memories of that movie were fond, especially a scene that was very difficult for a child of age 4 or 5 to do. Well, on my part, this was Manong asking me to eat from a coconut shell, which I thought was very dirty. Yun nga po, tumigil yung shooting ng mga 3 oras at hindi ko po makalimutan yung pagka-explain niya sa akin na para kang kumakain sa suso. Yun po, yun ang hindi ko makalimutan.
Well, what lingers in my memory up to now was that moment in time when I sat with my idol. He sat me at the top of the stairs dun sa Bustos, Bulacan, in a mansion in Bustos, Bulacan. And big deal sa akin yun noon eh. Binigyan ako ng importansya na hindi ko makakalimutan for a tyro like me. Sino ba naman ako at that time, you know? Tapos yung idol mo from way back, Sawa sa Lumang Simborio, Sisa, Sandawong, tapos the match talked about, huwag mo akong limutin. And of course, what really remains up to now in my memory was the conflagration scene of my favorite Jerry De Leon film ever, Daigdig ng Mga Api.
Being firm to the point of appearing cruel and insensitive is what Anita Linda remembers during the shooting of Sawa sa Lumang Simborio.
I was so angry, sometimes I don't talk to him kay Jerry. Nagagalit ako. Yun na parang sadist ba tawag doon? Sadist to, yung gano'n. Nakikita niya nahihirapan ako. Tsaka yun lang. Ang sakit dito sa ganito ko. Yung sumasakay ka sa kabayo, walang Diyos ko. Pero wala siyang pakialam kay masama ang loob mo, kay naiiyak ka na, kay nahuhulog. Rita Gomez, madalas mahulog. Nahulog ako, putok ang ulo ko dito. Siguro naman, hindi malaki. Pero may dugo. tumutulo ang dugo. Dinala ko sa bayan, sa doktor, kung may doktor doon sa clinic, dinala ko doon. Tumutulo ang dugo dito. Doon. Ando doon ako ngayon sa bahay ng doktor, Santa Maria, Ilocos, yun. Ando doon ako, nilagyan ng gamot, nilagyan ng kung ano-ano, okay na yan. Ando doon ako. Eto na yung isa. Anita, pinatatanong ho ni kung ayos na yun. Inaantay kayo ni Director. Kung pwede raw, to be continued na yung gagawin namin. You know that I just fell down. Kamuntik pa ako tapakan ng kabayo. Dahil hinahampas na para ko. And then uuwi na ako galing sa clinic at mag-shoot na nung continuation ng kwan.
Everyone who worked with him always mentions that Manong Jerry spoke in a whispery, raspy voice. This was the result of a car accident in 1947.
Silang dalawa ni Feli Vallejo went to see a movie once. And then afterwards, in coming home in a taxi, nahagilap sila ng American truck. Amerikano yung nagmamaneho. So, he was taken, naano siya sa ganito. Inalis yung kanilang dalawang sa spine, nawalan siya ng boses.
One of the most embarrassing moments of my life was spent with Jerry De Leon. And before your imagination goes wild, it was simply for a commercial, my very first commercial. Now, the embarrassing part came when, after noticing that his speech volume was very low, and like his throat was a bit raspy, I went up to him with all sense of volunteerism and asked if he would want a throat lozenge. Sabi ko, Director, baka gusto niyo ng lozenge to clear your throat. Without knowing, of course, that he had this ongoing throat problem, which was common knowledge in the industry. He froze for a while, maybe didn't know exactly what to say, but I guess realizing na bagong-bago ko, he just said, "Thank you very much, I'm okay, this is something regular to me." And we went on with the shooting. It was a film commercial. It wasn't until after that I found out about his throat problem.
Manong Jerry worked at a fast pace, yet he was said to take great pains to frame a shot.
His films are the best photographed during those times, best edited, and he really knows his craft.
He would take care of you as an actor, as his actor. He would take care of the camera, the lights, everything. I was amazed at what he can do.
One thing about Jerry is that he had an eye for visualization. If you examine some of his films, his angles and the business of the actors, always visual.
Jerry was kind of in terms of working with people, he was kind of a laid-back person. He didn't push himself forward very much. So that was how he worked with people, whether writer or actor or whatever. If he felt that a writer needed, closer guarding, he would give him that, sometimes to an annoying extent. Otherwise, he was perfectly content to leave him alone and wait for him to come up with what he was capable of coming up with.
Manong is one director who's really exceptional in the sense that he believes more on the facial expression. To him, the sound is secondary. Kung minsan nga, kung manood kami ng races, magkukumbina siya ng tao, papatayin niya ang sound, tapos sasabihin niya, "Did you understand?" If somebody says, "No, he didn't," okay, let's take it again. But if somebody said, "Yeah, it was clear without the sound," good, print that.
Once he said, Sound can be dubbed. Images are fixed. Besides, he had natural ear for music. This made it easier for someone like his brother Tito Arevalo, who composed many of the scores of Manong's films.
Jerry, besides being a good director, is also a good musician. So it was easy for us, me as a music director and he being the director, to agree on what kind of music his picture needs. And important of all is the cueing of music.
In 1982, 1 year after his death, Gerardo de Leon was declared National Artist in Film as a confirmation of his outstanding achievements and the high regard people had for him. By any standards, his achievements were extraordinary. Manong holds the distinction of being the most awarded director in the history of the Filipino Academy of Movie Arts and Sciences, FAMAS Awards, the Filipino Oscars. I know of no other Filipino director that, past or present, who can hold the candle to this achievement.
From 1952 to 1971, Manong Jerry was awarded 7 FAMAS Awards. 3 of them he received 3 years in a row. All of the films in which he won for Best Director also won for Best Picture at the FAMAS. Okay, next.
It can't be denied. Films like Sisa, No Limitangere, and El Filibusterismo, I think these are key masterpieces of Jerry De Leon, which made him really qualified to be a national artist. He was able to bring to life rich novels that the national hero was able to powerfully influence a lot of Filipinos during his time. And in a sense, Jerry De Leon was able to contribute to Filipino sense of nationhood. And also, he became a role model to artists after him.
Ang paglalarawan sa buhay ng mga bayani ay isang bagay na nakita na natin sa mga trabaho ni Jerry. At yun matatawag nating isang pamana ng kanyang pagiging direktor at pagiging national artist.
Ako po'y naniniwala na ang buhay parang isang mahabang paglalakbay. Meron po tayong isang landas na tinatahak. Diyan po dumadaan ang lahat. Marami diyan po ang dumaan, ngunit nag-iwan ng mababaw na bakas. At yan po ay madaling malimot at burahin ng panahon. Ngunit si Jerry De Leon ay hindi po. Sapagkat malalim ang iniwan ng bakas. Hindi maring malimot agad. Hindi maring burahin ng panahon. Katulad ng kanyang ginawang Moises Padilla story na nagustuhan ng marami. Ako po ay nagkapalad na lumabas sa pelikulang yan. Ako'y nanalo. Ngunit ito po ay sasabihin ko, hindi ako maring manalo kung hindi si Jerry De Leon ang nag-direct ng pelikulang yan.
However few they are, the masterworks that we can see are enough to elevate Manong Jerry to the stature of a legend.
The young generation should still be able to discover the genius of Gerardo De Leon through these available films.
We're talking now more of the neglect of the system, and we lost these gems, yung mga works niya. We lost, ilan ang nawala? 90%, 95% of his work. So, there's not much talaga na makikita. In my generation, ganon, naging, andun sa antas ng mito lang. Sinasabi ng mas matatanda sa amin na his works, yun talagang definitive na yung sa golden age na yun.
So I think all the more there has to be a concerted effort to make that awareness of the value of preservation, recovery of more films, film materials, and putting a value to having really a archive, of all these historical documents.
the passion for and love of movies. This is the essential legacy of Manong Jerry De Leon to our future filmmakers. But the essential tribute comes from a peer and contemporary who, like Manong Jerry, was a master filmmaker himself.
One thing he can rest assured about, and I say this to his brothers and sisters and to his beloved wife, he has left many heirlooms to the country. And they're not necessarily his films, because there will be other films that will come up and probably will equal the beauty of the films he has made. But he has left behind people, and that's important. I won't mention names. He has left behind scriptwriters. He has left behind cameramen. He has left behind actors and actresses. He has left behind directors. They know who they are. They owe their artistry, their art, their technique, and their devotion to their film work to one man, that man who now has left us. That is an heirloom that the country will enjoy, because we know that they will continue to make films the way Jerry was making them then. This is an heirloom that the country need be proud of, and we should continue to relish the thought that forever and ever there will always be the continuity of the dedication, the passion, and the love for filmmaking that Jerry had in his heart. Ako ay ako'y iyong mahal matapos basahin iniwan mong naglian huwag mong dinalain ako'y nagdaramdam pangako mong binawi alaalang naiwanan sa aking puso o hirang salamat sa salamat sa'yo, sinta. Tamis ng iyong mga labi, alaala ko sa tuwina. Hindi ko malilimutan, lambing ng ating sumpaan. Kahit nagling nakaraan, salamat sa'yo, hirang. Salamat.